Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, May 15th, 2020. The fair tax rate. It's their problem, not ours. When you explain the fair tax to people, in almost every case they like what they hear and are eager to support it. But then they ask what the rate is. We answer that it's a 23% inclusive rate or a 30% exclusive rate. Now that's the way state sales taxes are traditionally charged. Upon hearing that, the person we're talking to often looks shocked and makes comments like, "Wow, that's too high. Why does it have to be so high? At that rate, I won't be able to buy food for my family. And if the rate was 15%, now that would make sense." The sticker shock often remains even after you answer, well, that's what it will take to generate the same amount of money for the government as the income payroll tax system. You're already paying a sales tax because you can only make purchases with the money you have left over after paying your federal income payroll taxes. The prebate lets you spend up to the poverty level without paying any fair tax at all. And since the tax base is wider under the fair tax, the great majority of people will pay less fair tax than they're currently paying in income payroll tax. Well, fortunately, not everyone is scared away by what they initially perceive as an exorbitant rate, but many are. Now, all of us have experienced a negative reaction when we have to give someone some bad news. The normal human reaction to receiving bad news is to shoot the messenger. Now, the truth is, no thinking person wants to pay a 30% tax on all retail purchases of new goods and services. Now, do fair tax supporters really want to add to the financial burdens now facing almost all Americans? Well, absolutely not. And it's vitally important that we emphatically state that the only reason for the 30% rate is that that's the amount that Congress has forced on us if the fair tax is going to be revenue neutral. So how does Congress pile more and more spending onto more and more debt? Well, as with most problems, it's almost always done one small step at a time. The ruling class and their minions in D.C. have followed the examples of so many rulers throughout history who have transformed thriving countries into societies where almost everyone, well, everyone except the government leaders and their friends, are struggling to survive. They know that if they want to infringe mightily on people's liberties or confiscate their property, they'd better have a really good reason that justifies it, like protecting against COVID-19 or prosecuting a world war. Now, even then, people will only tolerate these infringements and confiscations if they believe that they're temporary. However, for most of the last 70 years, the ruling class and their minions in D.C. have not had a national emergency they could use. So, they've had to accomplish their massive confiscation of our wealth by hiding the amount of federal taxes they forcibly take from us. Their theory is that if you do it gradually enough, no one will realize what's actually happening to them. In other words, if you treat people the same way that you boil frogs, you place them in cool water to begin with, and then slowly increase the heat, they will almost always docilely accept what's being done to them until it's too late. Now, the ruling class and their minions have been very clever. They know that almost no one would tolerate the full amount that they are really paying in income payroll taxes if they could see it. So, they hide a significant portion of it by taxing corporations and businesses. They're betting that people won't realize that those businesses pass that tax liability and all the compliance costs that come with it right along to their customers. It's the customers who buy the products and services these businesses produce who are really paying those corporate taxes. Now, of course, that doesn't show up on a tax return, and that's just what the ruling class wants. They want people to believe that their tax returns show all of the federal taxes they pay, when in fact, those numbers aren't even close. The ruling class and their minions in D.C. have an incredibly demeaning and patronizing opinion of the American people. They don't believe it's important that the American citizens have the financial data that they would demand for their own budget decisions. They believe we're like the person driving down the freeway who hears a strange sound coming from his car's engine. That driver has two choices: either pull over at the next exit and get it checked out, or just hide the noise by turning up the radio. The ruling class is betting that most people will choose that second option and continue merrily along, blissfully unaware that there could be a serious problem developing. This disdainful attitude on the part of the ruling class and their minions in D.C. should offend every American. Each family trying to make their money last for the month knows that they need some basic information, like how much money do we have remaining after taxes? How much do we pay for living expenses? How much do we have left after that? And how much does something we want or need cost? If we need something but can't afford it, then unless it's a real emergency, we just simply don't buy it. We know that if we go into more debt than we can pay off, we'll end up bankrupt. Now that's not a complex concept. It's really very simple. In conclusion, in one of the Lincoln-Douglas debates in 1858, Abraham Lincoln stated, "You can fool all of the people some of the time, and some of the people all of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time." Of course, Lincoln was assuming that people had actual information. Now, if even the most accomplished mathematician using a very sophisticated computer was asked to calculate the exact amount he was paying in federal income payroll taxes, he couldn't do it. Now, yes, he could look at the amount shown on his federal tax return, but that would not include all of the embedded taxes and compliance costs added to the prices of the goods and services he purchases. Those numbers are just not available anywhere. However, none of us will have any trouble at all calculating what the fair tax will cost us. All we have to do is know that the prices of all the goods and services we're going to purchase will be increased by 30%. Very simple. Now, under the fair tax, though, note that the actual product prices for new goods and services will likely decrease significantly. That's because manufacturers and suppliers will no longer have to add the costs of the income payroll tax system to those prices. However, the analysis is still the same. Take the prices of the new goods and services we purchase and multiply the total by 30%. When enough people realize that they've been misled, will that create the uproar that the ruling class and their minions in D.C. so secretly fear? We can only hope so. It's time to recognize that we are the real masters of our own fate. We don't need the ruling class and their minions in D.C. telling us what to do. We are only asking that if America is still a republic, that we be given all the information we need to make sound financial decisions. If you're ready to take a very significant step toward wresting control of your government back from a small group of corrupt people and making it possible for all to prosper, go to FAIRtax.org and join us. Then contact your member of Congress and the President and demand that Congress pass the fair tax, the only truly fair tax.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at FAIRtax.org.